The morning in a small French coastal town carried a thin, colorless light as officers stood outside a modest apartment, their breath rising in pale clouds. The name on the European warrant had traveled far to reach this door, borne on 18 years of grief and a strand of DNA that refused to disappear. When the man appeared, older now, his hair streaked with gray, the corridor seemed to contract around him. The handcuffs closed with a clean, mechanical finality, and one officer, almost involuntarily, pictured a father in a small Spanish town who had carried his daughter's photo like armor against the years. 18 winters had passed between the night a girl vanished and this hallway in France. A case that had gathered dust and despair finally had a heartbeat again. In the silence after the click of steel, the weight of 2 decades shifted, from rumor into evidence, from grief into action. Yet even in that silence, unseen and unspoken, another fate was already forming. For though they had finally found him, justice itself was about to slip away once more. My name is James, and if you're drawn to true crime stories that are rarely told, you've come to the right place. Here, we uncover powerful and riveting cases you won't find on other channels. So sit back, get comfortable, and if you enjoy this kind of storytelling, make sure to like the video and subscribe. Now, let's begin. The rain fell lightly that evening, April 19, 1997, bathing the empty streets of Valgete in a reflective sheen beneath scattered streetlights. It was almost midnight when Eva Blanco, a responsible 16-year-old known among friends for her punctuality, stepped away from a friend near a vacant lot, taking a shortcut toward home. With only a short walk ahead, Eva disappeared quietly into the darkness, leaving behind only echoes and shadows. Eva had always been reliable. As one friend recalled later, she was a girl who never came home late. If you gave her a time, she was there. That evening, her parents, Manuel Blanco and Olga Pug, anxiously awaited Eva's return. When the clock slipped past midnight, anxiety quickly turned to dread. Eva wasn't home, and this was not like her. Panic began to seep in with every passing minute. Manuel and Olga picked up the phone, desperately calling Eva's friends, hoping against hope someone had seen her. Each call ended with disappointment, each unanswered question fueling deeper fear. It was shortly before 1 a.m. when the couple decided they could wait no longer. They contacted the local civil guard, expecting immediate action, but their urgency was met with a stunning and dismissive response. Officers at the door brushed aside their concern, remarking casually that teenagers her age were often drugging themselves and suggesting Eva would likely be found sleeping it off in a doorway. The moment of indifferent apathy shocked Eva's parents, intensifying their frustration. Precious time was slipping away, and Eva was still missing. With no official search underway, Eva's parents led a desperate effort. Friends and neighbors joined, combing streets and empty lots under the dim street lamps, but the night yielded no sign of Eva. As the early morning arrived, exhausted searchers slowly returned home, hearts heavy with failure. A sense of helplessness hung over Algete as dawn broke over rooftops and empty streets. Meanwhile, a grim discovery waited quietly at the outskirts of town. At around 9 a.m. on April 20th, 2 elderly residents walking a rural road 6 kilometers from Algete noticed something unusual in a roadside ditch. Approaching cautiously, the reality quickly became clear. There, lying motionless and partially concealed by grass, was Eva's lifeless body. Eva lay fully clothed, strangely composed, yet with clear signs of violence. One sleeve of her jacket inexplicably removed, the fabric soaked through by night's rainfall. Multiple stab wounds marred her body, evidence of an attack vicious and disturbing in nature. Her discovery sent shockwaves through the community, transforming quiet fear into open horror and disbelief. A town once peaceful was suddenly thrust into a nightmare, struggling to grasp how something so cruel and sudden could happen among them. Local newspapers rushed to break the harrowing news, headlines screaming tragedy, filling households with dread. Families throughout Algete now wondered who among them was capable of such brutality. Eva's father, Manuel Blanco, broken yet driven by a singular need to understand, would later say simply, "I just want to know why." As word spread, anger replaced confusion in many hearts. The initial dismissal of Eva's disappearance by authorities became painfully evident as a crucial missed opportunity. Had the search begun earlier, perhaps Eva might have been found alive. That haunting question lingered unspoken but deeply felt. The crime scene itself raised troubling questions. Eva's body had been placed deliberately, her clothing rearranged, suggesting some attempt at staging. But by whom and why? The lack of immediate answers frustrated the community, now demanding justice, accountability, and above all, the safety of their own children. Investigators finally began to move, late but determined. Initial forensic evidence was quickly gathered, though it would be days before results would offer any hint of clarity. Eva's parents struggled to balance grief with a determination to see justice served. Manuel and Olga confronted both their private sorrow and a public demand for answers, an emotional weight no parent should ever bear. In the coming days, Algete transformed from a sleepy, overlooked town to a focal point of nationwide media attention. Eva Blanco's murder had pierced the collective consciousness, stirring public outrage. But beneath that outcry, the community mourned deeply and quietly, trying to piece together a fractured sense of safety and innocence that had vanished overnight. And yet, in those initial desperate hours after Eva's disappearance, crucial time had been squandered. The delay in response by the civil guard would cast a long shadow over the investigation to come, a painful reminder of what might have been. Even as Eva was laid to rest, doubts lingered like ghosts, whispering accusations of negligence and regret. As Eva's funeral procession wound solemnly through Algete's streets days later, her friends, family, and even strangers bore witness to the devastating cost of a moment's indifference. This tragedy was just the beginning. However, as the search for answers soon revealed a case more complex, troubling, and bewildering than anyone could have imagined. Eva Blanco's story had become much more than a tragic disappearance. It had become a grim puzzle whose pieces were still waiting to be uncovered, pieces that would challenge assumptions, test resolve, and keep the community on edge for years to come. Yet for now, one thing remained chillingly certain. Eva's killer was still out there, hidden in plain sight, awaiting discovery. Eva Blanco's death left a wound that ran deep through Algete, but as investigators began peeling back the layers of evidence, the clarity sought by her grieving community only seemed to slip further away. On April 20th, 1997, while friends and family were still struggling to comprehend the brutality of her loss, the autopsy painted an even more disturbing picture. The forensic report revealed Eva had suffered 19 stab wounds inflicted with calculated violence. Blood loss was identified as the primary cause of death, but the horror did not stop there. The medical report confirmed Eva had been subjected to an act against her will. The coroner also confirmed the presence of semen, evidence Eva had been essayed. Yet troubling contradictions arose immediately. The victim was found fully clothed, with no evident defensive injuries, suggesting she might have known or trusted her attacker. In the initial rush of the investigation, authorities proposed a controversial theory. Perhaps the assault began consensually and then escalated violently. This notion, seemingly at odds with Eva's character, as described by those who knew her, immediately angered her parents. Manuel and Olga outright rejected any insinuation that Eva could have willingly been with her attacker that night. They insisted instead that their daughter had been kidnapped and assaulted by a stranger, a theory starkly at odds with the investigators' early assumptions. The divide between family and investigators widened quickly, complicating an already fractured investigation. With conflicting narratives emerging, the Civil Guard began to focus their attention on individuals known to Eva, scrutinizing friends, acquaintances, and possible secret boyfriends. The investigation seemed fixated on personal connections rather than the broader possibility of a random predator. Rumors spread quickly through Algete, causing tension and distrust among neighbors. The community, already grieving, became cautious and suspicious, each questioning glance or hushed conversation amplifying the sense of unease. Despite intense efforts, no evidence emerged. Investigators began to question their approach, realizing they might be looking in the wrong direction. The Blanco family's grief, meanwhile, morphed into a relentless pursuit of answers. Manuel Blanco refused to accept the silence and ambiguity that haunted his daughter's death. Driven by desperation and frustration at the slow pace of the investigation, Manuel soon began pushing publicly for an unprecedented step. He proposed mass DNA testing of the male residents of Algete. In November 1999, almost 2 years after Eva's death, Manuel petitioned authorities to voluntarily collect DNA samples from roughly 5,000 local men. He argued this could potentially reveal the attacker and bring justice to his family. But his plea, bold and controversial, was swiftly rejected by Spain's judicial authorities. Dismissing his suggestion as simple-minded and useless, they argued that such broad testing violated civil liberties and offered no guarantees of success. This rejection deeply wounded the family and complicated public perception of the case. To many residents, it seemed authorities were unwilling or unable to explore every possible avenue to uncover Eva's killer. Yet, even amid controversy, the authorities stood firm, insisting their methods were sound despite the growing frustration in the community. Meanwhile, false leads and vague tips multiplied. Investigators chased rumors and theories that emerged from whispers and local gossip. Police sketches circulated widely, leading residents to scrutinize every unfamiliar face or suspicious vehicle. The small-town fear and suspicion became tangible as trust slowly eroded beneath a veneer of civility. One particular piece of evidence, a size 42 shoe print found at the crime scene, seemed promising but ultimately proved frustratingly ambiguous. It could belong to anyone, investigators admitted, a symbol of the maddening uncertainty that plagued the case from the outset. The investigators' early stages demonstrated both the potential and pitfalls of forensic science. DNA, a relatively new investigative tool in Spain at that time, offered hope, but only if matched to a suspect. Without a clear target, DNA samples merely accumulated, waiting for the right break. Investigators and the Blanco family alike found themselves trapped by evidence that could illuminate but not yet identify. Months turned to years, and the initial spark of the investigation faded slowly into quiet resignation. Eva's parents remained persistent, unwilling to let the memory of their daughter or the crime fade into obscurity. Yet frustration defined their lives, bound to the haunting notion that justice might never arrive. By the end of the investigation's chaotic initial phase, the community had lost trust in quick solutions or easy explanations. Eva Blanco's murder remained stubbornly unsolved, a wound refusing to heal, a constant reminder that somewhere among them was a killer hiding in plain sight. This unsettling fact would linger in Algete for a decade before forensic science and a radical shift in investigative thinking would finally provide the breakthrough everyone hoped for, yet no one had seen coming. But in these early years, Eva's death became symbolic of a profound failure, an injustice left unresolved, a truth hidden behind false leads, and a community's faith shattered by uncertainty. As Eva's parents continued their lonely battle for answers, the killer's true identity remained elusive, cloaked in mystery, waiting quietly for the right moment to emerge from the shadows. Yet, unbeknownst to all, a critical piece of evidence, the DNA recovered from Eva's body, waited patiently in silence, ready to one day unravel the truth behind this terrible crime. For nearly a decade, Eva Blanco's murder lingered as an open wound in Algete. By 2007, fading posters and dusty case files symbolized the stagnation of an investigation once fueled by urgency. But quietly, beneath the visible despair, hope rested on a single vial of genetic material recovered from Eva's body, a silent witness awaiting a scientific breakthrough. That breakthrough finally arrived in 2007 when forensic experts at the University of Santiago de Compostela revisited Eva's DNA samples using advanced techniques unavailable at the time of her murder. The result was stunning, reshaping the investigation entirely. The previously anonymous DNA now pointed decisively towards a suspect of North African descent, specifically a man likely from the Maghreb region. This revelation transformed the investigators' approach. Gone was the theory of a secret boyfriend or an acquaintance, gone violently rogue. Instead, detectives faced a new reality. The perpetrator was likely a stranger, an outsider, whose cultural and ethnic background opened new avenues for inquiry. While narrowing the search, the DNA results also challenged the community's assumptions about the killer. Public reaction to the revelation was cautious, wary of false hope. Could the new scientific discovery genuinely lead investigators to the elusive killer after years of disappointment? Or was this another promising clue destined to dissolve into uncertainty? The DNA finding also prompted investigators to seek new perspectives. They turned to prominent criminologist Vicente Garrido Genoves, whose expertise in criminal psychology and profiling had previously solved perplexing cases. Garrido carefully examined every detail of Eva's murder, from the lack of defensive wounds to the careful staging of her body. On April 26, 2013, in a widely viewed television special, Garrido shared a new theory. Eva's attacker was neither a secret boyfriend nor acquaintance, but rather a stalker, a predatory stranger who had observed Eva, targeted her, and planned his attack meticulously. Garrido explained the absence of defensive wounds as evidence of Eva's paralysis under threat, likely at knife point, an explanation both chilling and persuasive. Suddenly, a crime that had confounded investigators for years took clearer shape, aligning with the emerging forensic evidence. Garrido's profile galvanized public interest and shifted the investigation's trajectory dramatically. Investigators re examined old case files, looking specifically at incidents involving harassment, stalking, or suspicious behavior around Alhete in the weeks before Eva's murder. This reorientation marked a crucial turning point, breathing new life into the stagnant investigation. Then, months later, a new witness stepped forward. Prompted by another television appeal aired in October of 2013, the witness recalled a critical detail from the night Eva vanished. A suspicious looking man loitering near the crime scene alongside a distinctive vehicle, a white Renault 18. The description was precise enough for authorities to craft a detailed facial composite, offering the public their first concrete image of Eva's suspected killer. The release of this facial composite revitalized public engagement with Eva's case. Posters bearing the sketch spread rapidly, igniting conversations and prompting hundreds of tips. Investigators pursued every lead, careful not to repeat past mistakes of dismissing seemingly minor details. But one piece of evidence, the white Renault 18, captured their attention especially. This vehicle, rare even in 1997, provided a tangible link between the mysterious suspect and the night Eva was killed. Detectives meticulously tracked registrations of white Renault 18 vehicles throughout the region. It was tedious, painstaking work, yet it represented the best chance to identify the elusive stranger haunting Alhete. Meanwhile, the community, initially wary, began cautiously optimistic. Perhaps after years of false starts, justice was within reach. As investigators narrowed their focus, they began assembling a clear narrative. Eva had not simply encountered random violence that night. She had been carefully observed, deliberately targeted, her attacker calculating every move. The killer was disciplined enough to leave behind minimal physical evidence, yet careless enough to leave crucial DNA behind. DNA now pointing unmistakably toward North Africa. The realization forced investigators into a challenging position. If Eva's murderer was indeed North African, suspicion risked igniting tensions and prejudice. Authorities trod carefully, determined not to provoke conflict, while vigorously pursuing the truth. Still, fear quietly spread among immigrant communities, wary of increased scrutiny. The careful balance investigators sought was difficult but necessary. Justice demanded answers, regardless of social discomfort. The breakthroughs of 2007 and 2013 dramatically reshaped Eva Blanco's murder investigation. Science and psychology had provided powerful tools, moving the investigation forward despite setbacks. But critical questions remained unanswered. Who exactly was this shadowy stalker? Could a decades-old case truly be solved through scientific advances alone? And perhaps most hauntingly, was Eva's killer still among them, or had he long since vanished beyond the reach of justice? Yet hope had returned, fragile but genuine. Investigators were now armed with science, expert profiling, and renewed public attention. They knew Eva's killer was no ghost, no figment of collective fear. He was a real man whose identity was encoded within strands of DNA, waiting patiently to be discovered. For Eva's family, these breakthroughs represented painful, cautious hope, justice delayed, yet perhaps finally attainable. They held onto this hope quietly, their strength tempered by a decade of grief, their resolve undiminished. In Alhete, whispers persisted. Behind closed doors and quiet conversations, residents wondered whether justice would truly come, or if this new lead would again dissolve into frustrating obscurity. But this time felt different. This time, it seemed the investigation was finally closing in. Investigators now prepared to cast a wider net, determined to find the single man whose DNA matched the precious sample, the one whose hidden presence had haunted Algete for far too long. But no one yet knew the search would lead beyond Spain's borders, drawing international attention and turning Eva's murder investigation into a landmark case in criminal justice history. Algete waited anxiously, uncertain yet hopeful, as investigators braced themselves for the final, decisive chapter in a decades-long search for justice. By late 2013, investigators had meticulously retraced every conceivable step in the pursuit of Eva Blanco's killer. The revelation that Eva's murderer was almost certainly of North African descent had injected new urgency into the investigation, setting the stage for an exhaustive, painstaking search. What began as a local tragedy had transformed into an intricate international manhunt, pushing the boundaries of forensic technology and detective work. In December 2013, the Civil Guard launched a targeted campaign requesting voluntary DNA samples from approximately 300 men of North African heritage who had resided in Algete around the time Eva was killed. It was a difficult, sensitive process. Some men cooperated willingly, eager to help clear their names, while others resisted, wary of stigma or suspicion. Yet the investigators moved forward deliberately, understanding the delicate balance between thoroughness and respect for civil rights. Months passed as the tedious forensic work unfolded. Each DNA sample represented both a possible answer and another potential disappointment. But in September 2015, nearly 2 years after the campaign began, forensic experts made a groundbreaking discovery. One sample stood out unmistakably: the DNA provided by a man named Fouad Shell, a former resident of Algete. Was not an exact match, but it was shockingly close. The analysis indicated a 97% likelihood that Fouad was the brother of Eva's killer. After nearly 2 decades, the case had narrowed from thousands of possibilities to a single family line. With Fouad identified, investigators swiftly traced his family tree, arriving at the name of his brother, Ahmed Chel Ger, a Moroccan-Spanish citizen who had lived transiently in Algete during the critical period of Eva's murder. Digging deeper, police uncovered troubling details. Ahmed had occupied a caravan near the crime scene precisely during the months Eva was killed, a fact overlooked in the initial investigation nearly 2 decades prior. Now, with Ahmed firmly at the center of their focus, detectives moved decisively. Further investigation revealed Ahmed had long since left Spain. His whereabouts unknown, but authorities quickly learned he was now residing in France, leading a quiet life in Besançon. Time was running perilously short. Under Spanish law, the statute of limitations for Eva's murder would expire in just 18 months. If Ahmed was not located and arrested before then, justice for Eva would slip away permanently, a devastating prospect for her family and community. Detectives urgently secured a European arrest warrant, leveraging international cooperation to track down Ahmed in France. They moved carefully, aware of the complexity of extradition cases and the scrutiny of the international media. The moment was tense. After nearly 2 decades, Eva's family stood on the brink of closure, their hopes tempered by years of disappointment. On October 1st, 2015, in a quiet residential neighborhood in Besançon, French police finally located and arrested Ahmed Chel Guer. Surrounded by plainclothes officers, Ahmed displayed no resistance, seemingly resigned to the inevitable. News of his arrest quickly reverberated back to Algete, bringing both relief and renewed anguish. For Eva's parents, this arrest was bittersweet. The relief of finally having a suspect arrested mingled with the pain of old wounds reopened. Ahmed's arrest marked a turning point in the case, but it also opened troubling questions. Who exactly was Ahmed Chel, the man now accused of Eva's brutal murder? Had he acted alone, or did others remain hidden behind his shadowy past? Investigators were faced with building a case robust enough to secure a conviction after nearly 2 decades. No easy task, especially with memories fading and evidence inevitably aging. Yet, the DNA evidence stood firm, incontrovertible in its implications. Ahmed's DNA matched perfectly with the genetic material found on Eva's body. This scientific evidence, long held in silence, now spoke unequivocally. Investigators felt cautiously confident, their resolve hardened by the clarity DNA provided. Back in Algete, a sense of cautious relief took hold. Residents gathered quietly in cafes and homes, discussing the news with hushed disbelief. The arrest reignited painful memories for many, but it also rekindled hope for justice, a possibility that had seemed distant for far too long. Eva's father, Manuel Blanco, publicly expressed relief mixed with gratitude toward the investigators whose persistence had finally paid off. The rest was proof, he stated, that perseverance mattered, that Eva had not been forgotten, and neither had the pursuit of justice. Yet the investigation was far from complete. Ahmed, though arrested, quickly began offering contradictory statements. His narrative shifted and blurred with each interrogation, hinting at either confusion, deception, or both. Detectives understood the complexity ahead. They would need to untangle truth from lies, ensuring justice was not only captured, but secured in court. The upcoming trial loomed heavily. Would Ahmed maintain his innocence despite the overwhelming forensic evidence? Would he provide meaningful answers to questions that haunted Eva's family for nearly 2 decades? Or would he retreat into silence and confusion? The pressure mounted as prosecutors began preparing their case, determined not only to achieve justice, but to finally provide answers long overdue. Ahmed's capture represented both closure and a new beginning, a new phase fraught with complexities, challenges, and uncertainties. Yet for Algete, this was undeniably progress, proof of the resilience and determination that defined their long search for truth. The manhunt that had stretched across borders was over. The next chapter would unfold within the sterile, contentious confines of courtrooms and interrogation chambers. Yet, even as prosecutors prepared for trial, the unexpected awaited them. Ahmed's arrest was only the beginning of a new storm, one that would challenge everything investigators thought they understood about this case. In the days following his arrest, Ahmed sat in custody, silent and inscrutable. His arrest had sparked renewed hope in Algete, but soon that hope was overshadowed by a series of perplexing statements, shifting narratives, and controversial claims that threatened to fracture the clarity investigators had painstakingly built. Confronted directly with the undeniable DNA evidence, Ahmed initially appeared stunned, confused, as if caught in a reality he neither expected nor understood. Soon after, his statements took a bizarre and troubling turn. In his first interrogation on October 5th, 2015, Ahmed claimed unconvincingly that two unidentified men had forced him at knife point to approach Eva's body after she was already dead, compelling him to ejaculate over her remains. The scenario, convoluted and improbable, stood in stark contradiction to forensic evidence, which clearly indicated Eva had been alive during the assault. Ahmed's claim revealed more about his desperation than truth, an attempt to deflect blame even when confronted with irrefutable science. Investigators quickly recognized Ahmed's story for what it was, a clumsy fabrication meant to obscure his direct role. But the shifting narratives had only just begun. His defense would soon pivot, setting off a firestorm of controversy that cast shadows over Eva's character, her family, and even the broader community itself. 2 weeks later, Ahmed's lawyer stunned investigators and the public by proposing an incendiary and troubling defense strategy. On October 19th, he publicly claimed that Eva Blanco had held neo-Nazi sympathies, suggesting she would never have voluntarily gone with a Moroccan man. To support this deeply inflammatory accusation, he referenced obscure entries from Eva's teenage diaries. The lawyer's strategy seemed clear: to deflect suspicion by painting Eva in an unsympathetic, controversial light. Eva's family and community reacted swiftly and angrily. Her parents absolutely denied the allegations, calling the claims malicious distortions of private teenage writings taken entirely out of context. Investigators dismissed the theory outright, finding no credible evidence Eva harbored extremist beliefs. Yet the damage had been done. Public discourse turned heated, clouded by bitter debate, with the narrative dangerously veering away from Ahmed's alleged crimes toward victim blaming and controversy. The lawyer's strategy, though deeply harmful to Eva's family, briefly succeeded in creating confusion, fracturing public support, and complicating the prosecution's path forward. Ahmed's shifting narrative proved challenging for prosecutors. Each conflicting statement introduced doubt and complexity, even though the DNA evidence remained firm and unwavering. The legal team had to carefully dismantle Ahmed's fabrications one by one, painstakingly reaffirming the core truth. Ahmed's DNA linked him unquestionably to Eva's assault and murder. Meanwhile, the wider public discourse surrounding the case continued to intensify. Media coverage focused heavily on Ahmed's contradictions and the controversial neo-Nazi allegations, risking a distraction from the central facts of the case. Eva's parents found themselves in the painful position of defending their daughter's character against reckless, sensational accusations, an agony no grieving family should endure. Yet, amid controversy and chaos, prosecutors remained steadfast. They were determined to present a clear, unambiguous account of Ahmed's guilt, focusing solely on the irrefutable forensic evidence rather than the shifting sands of Ahmed's confused and misleading statements. For Ahmed himself, the contradictions in his statements revealed more than mere desperation. They hinted at his internal struggle, his refusal, or perhaps his inability to fully acknowledge the horrific act he had committed. His defense's inflammatory tactics highlighted broader issues surrounding racial tension, prejudice, and victim blaming, discussions the public now confronted head on. But beneath this media-driven storm lay an undeniable truth, expressed simply yet powerfully by Eva's father, Manuel Blanco. For me, if the DNA is yours, you killed her. You commit suicide, you killed her. His raw, unfiltered words cut through confusion and controversy, expressing a reality both heartbreaking and incontrovertible. The prosecution's case, though complicated by Ahmed's shifting statements, remains solidly anchored in forensic science. Yet the public drama that unfolded alongside the investigation revealed unsettling truths about society's readiness to exploit victims' lives, to blame the innocent, and to twist tragedy for sensational gain. Investigators and prosecutors alike knew the path ahead would be difficult, filled with further controversy, courtroom battles, and difficult questions about justice, prejudice, and accountability. But despite these challenges, the truth remained clear and unequivocal. Ahmed's DNA connected him definitively to Eva's death, no matter how many stories he told or how loudly distractions attempted to drown it out. Just as it seemed the trial would finally move forward, fate intervened in an unexpected and deeply troubling way, thrusting the case into its final tragic phase, one that would deny Eva's family the full measure of justice they had pursued so tirelessly. With Ahmed awaiting trial, the case seemed poised for resolution, ready to deliver the justice that Eva's family and the entire community of Alhete had awaited nearly 2 decades. Yet, just as the courtroom stage was finally set, tragedy took a sudden, irreversible turn, one that would deepen Eva's family anguish and ignite painful questions about justice, accountability, and the failures of a system entrusted to deliver both. From the moment Ahmed entered custody, authorities recognized he was psychologically vulnerable. Just days after his arrest, on October 5th, 2015, Ahmed attempted suicide, cutting his jugular vein in a desperate, unsuccessful act that highlighted his precarious mental state. Prison officials immediately placed him under strict anti-suicide protocols, closely monitoring his every move. Yet, despite explicit judicial orders mandating continued vigilance, prison authorities would soon make a fateful decision that would profoundly alter the case. On January 29th, 2016, prison officials at Alcalá Meco inexplicably and unilaterally lifted Ahmed's anti-suicide protocols, a decision taken without judicial approval or oversight. Left without continuous supervision, Ahmed took advantage of this tragic oversight. Hours later, he was discovered dead in his cell, having hanged himself using his own shoelaces. His death brought an abrupt and shocking end to the criminal proceedings against him, denying Eva's family the chance to see him formally convicted. News of Ahmed's suicide quickly reached Alhete, evoking a complex mixture of relief, anger, and renewed grief. Eva's family now faced the reality that justice, in its fullest form, would never be delivered. The courtroom confrontation they had long awaited would never take place. Their questions would never be answered directly by Ahmed himself. On February 15, 2016, Spanish authorities formally closed the case without a conviction. The courtroom remained empty, the gavel silent. Although Ahmed's DNA proved unquestionably that he had committed the crime, the absence of a judicial verdict left Eva's family feeling robbed of the resolution they deserved. Manuel Blanco described it as a painful void, a hollow space where justice should have been, yet now forever unreachable. As Eva's family processed their complex emotions, yet another painful chapter began to unfold. In October 2020, nearly 5 years after Ahmed's death, Spain's Supreme Court ruled that the state had been negligent in lifting Ahmed's anti-suicide protocols without judicial consent. This controversial decision mandated that the Spanish government pay Ahmed's family 19,000 euros in compensation for this negligence. The ruling immediately sparked widespread outrage, reigniting painful debates about victims' rights, offender accountability, and institutional responsibility. Eva's family found themselves confronting new anguish. For them, the Supreme Court's decision felt like a betrayal, another wound inflicted by a justice system that had repeatedly failed their daughter. Public reaction was swift and fierce, with many expressing disbelief and anger that Ahmed's family would receive compensation, while Eva's own family remained forever bereft of true judicial closure. Yet even amid this fresh wave of controversy, Manuel Blanco spoke softly but powerfully, capturing a painful truth shared by so many families caught in similar circumstances. Justice has not been done because it hasn't. But for me, the DNA is yours. You killed her. His simple statement cut through the tangled web of legal proceedings, institutional failures, and endless controversy, articulating an unvarnished truth impossible to deny. Eva's story had begun as a quiet tragedy in a small town, but over nearly 2 decades, it had evolved into something far more profound. Her case exposed the limits and possibilities of forensic science, the vulnerabilities of a flawed prison system, and the painful complexities of a justice system struggling to balance fairness with accountability. Above all, Eva's story highlighted the enduring strength of a family's relentless pursuit of justice, even when confronted by disappointment, obstruction, and loss. The Blanco family found closure bittersweet. Ahmed's death meant he could never harm again, but it also meant justice, clear, definitive justice, had escaped their grasp. Eva's legacy, however, transcended this absence. Her case inspired reforms in forensic practices, awareness about institutional negligence, and deep discussions around the rights of victims and their families. Today, Eva's family remains dedicated to preserving her memory, ensuring her story is not forgotten. Alhete, forever marked by tragedy, continues to grapple with the complexities of justice and accountability, mourning not only the loss of Eva, but the missed opportunities, broken promises, and painful truths her story revealed. In the silence that followed Ahmed's death, one question remained forever unanswered. Why? It was the question Eva's father had asked from the very beginning, the simplest yet hardest question of all. And while Ahmed took that answer to his grave, Eva's story remains, reminding everyone who hears it that justice is never guaranteed, yet always worth fighting for. Eva's voice, though silenced that tragic April night, continues to echo powerfully through Alhete and far beyond, challenging communities, institutions, and individuals alike to listen, to reflect, and above all, to remember.